Hello and welcome to the FatBoss Guide to the Norushen encounter 10-man normal in the Siege of Orgrimmar.
Hello, and this fight is actually really quite interesting because it doesn't even consist of fighting Norushen. You're fighting an amalgam of corruption, and you're also doing these like personal trials depending on your role, like in order to do more of your role. It's really quite interesting, really cool.
Yeah, very interesting. Now for this encounter you want to bring 2 tanks, 2 to 3 healers, and a mixed DPS setup. It doesn't really matter what DPS you bring. And to start off, we'll talk about what the boss does and how to counter his personal abilities.
Now for the tanks you need to worry about 2 abilities really, the first of which is Unleashed Anger. Now this does hit the tank for 400k, it's like the boss's big hit, but he also puts a debuff on you called Self-Doubt. Now this increases the amount of damage you take from Unleashed Anger by 40% per stack, and really, to be honest, you need to taunt around 4 or 5 stacks, but we'll get more to how you like deal with tanking that boss a little bit later, because it's a bit more complicated than just taunt on this many.
Now his main ability that will one-shot you more or less is Blind Hatred. This will spawn a massive beam that spins around the boss. It acts very much like a Halion Cutter or a Duramu I-Beam shit, so you need to make sure that you don't get hit by this. It will one-hit you more or less, but it's very predictable. When it does spawn, just make sure that you're not near it, and then as soon as you work out which directions it's spinning, because it will go clockwise or counterclockwise, you can't really tell until it actually starts spinning. So when it spawns, look at it, see which way it's about to go in the complete opposite direction. Make sure you don't go anywhere near it.
Now the boss also does something called Icy Fear, which is like AoE damage done to the raid that it ticks every now and then, but the thing is it does do more damage the less health the boss has, so being stacked up during this fight really does help the healers, because it can get really quite intense towards the end on the healing, so yeah, be stacked up for your healers, be nice.
Now at 50% and every 10% of the boss's health that's missing after that point, the boss will spawn an ad called an Unleashed Manifestation of Corruption. We're going to call it a big ad, because it's a big ad. Now, this does Bursts of Anger, which is like a 50k AoE to the raid, so it's even more of a reason to keep stacked up. And when it dies, it will leave a ball on the floor that does 90k ticking damage to the raid. Now, if a player runs over it, it will absorb the orb, but the player will gain 25 corruption. You're probably thinking, what the fuck is corruption?
Well, I'll tell you what corruption is. Now, when you do pull the boss, you'll notice that you have 75 out of 100 corruption on this little bar that you have at the bottom. Now, when you do have any corruption, you'll do reduced damage and healing for the boss, and also as a tank you'll take slightly more damage as well. Now, in order to remove your corruption, you must use a mechanic called Look Within. Now, Look Within is basically, there are 2 orbs towards the entrance of the room, and when you interact with them, you will enter a different phase in which you will have to do a role-specific challenge. Think of it as, like, the Proving Grounds, but in a boss fight.
Yeah, it more or less is that, yeah. Now, as a tank, when you enter this room, there's 2 different things you can do. In this room, there's just an ad, and it has a frontal cone ability that you need to move out of. There's an ability that you have to interrupt. If you don't interrupt it, it more or less one-hits you. But the idea is that you either have to survive for a minute, or you can kill the ad.
Yeah, if you manage to actually kill the ad before the 1 minute mark is up, you get to leave early, which is nice, and when you do leave, you get rid of all your corruption. But if, for some reason, you don't have like a lot of vengeance going into that phase, because you haven't been tanking the boss, say you went straight in, or anything like that, so it can be quite hard to kill that ad, so you might be just worth chilling out and waiting for it. So, but the benefit that you do get as a tank when you do go through this trial is that you will take reduced amount of damage. So it is actually a really good thing, because the boss does hit really quite hard, especially on high stacks.
Yeah, and with the reduced damage, you can take more stacks.
Exactly.
But that's only if you remain at 0% corruption. Now, as a healer, when you enter this room, there'll be 3 NPCs with you, and the whole point is that you need to keep them alive. And it's relatively easy to do. There's 3 of them. There's a tank, there's a range deeps, and there's a melee deeps.
I think they're actually the people from the boss fight before. They're the protectors of the fallen from the boss fight before.
That I didn't actually notice,
I
but
think
it's a possibility. All you need to do is just keep them healed up. They'll kill the ad, you get taken out. It's as simple as that. And when you do come out, you no longer have reduced healing, providing you do actually stay at that 0% corruption. Now, for DPS, we don't actually have a point of view, unfortunately, but it's ridiculously simple. And the damage that you deal to the ads will also be dealt to the boss.
Yeah, which is good.
So going inside, there isn't actually that much of a DPS downtime compared. So going in isn't actually a bad thing. And inside there are 2 different ads. There's a Manifestation of Corruption. It does a frontal cone, so make sure you move from it. And there's an Essence of Corruption ad that sends out bolts in a straight line. Once again, move from it.
It's best to like have like really mobile DPS to go in there. It's quite easy, but to be honest, we sent all different classes in there and there was never anyone who like died from it, so you can go in there and there shouldn't be any issue at all. Now the benefit you do gain as a DPS is that you will no longer have the reduced damage because you have no corruption. So if you are at 0 corruption, you won't be like, you'll be absolutely fine. You'll be doing quite a lot more damage than you were doing before. Now, an interesting thing is that when you are inside and you kill anything as a DPS in that phase, it will actually send them over to the rest of the group. Now, the manifestations, which are the big ads, will act as they normally do instead of how they act when you're in the trial. So they will be dropping orbs and they will be doing AoE. And the essences they will cast their bolts still, their straight line bolts. However, they will do it towards the boss. Now, these need to be intercepted. So either you need to take the damage or you just need to kill them before they even cast it. Because if they reach the boss, they will give the boss a 5% damage increase that stacks. It only lasts 15 seconds, so maybe if one goes through, you shouldn't have too much issue. But like, if you just like don't bother and there's like 3 of them constantly spam casting the boss, you're gonna die so quickly.
Yeah, so you need to make sure that you intercept them, but they're so easy to kill. They've got very, very little health. I mean, with all the DPS that you have outside, you can just blow them up immediately. So that's more or less the encounter. It's very, very simple. The only thing that you really need to do as a raid team before you do pull the boss is just work out who's going in at what point. Now, what we decided to do, initially on the pull, we immediately sent 2 DPS in, so the DPS could drop their corruption, so we had maximum DPS when they came back out from our highest DPS. Then after that point, we sent a tank and a healer in, and then after the tank and the healer are done, we then sent in 2 more DPS, and then we sent a tank and a healer in again, and then we left it at that point. At that point, we then just decided to just kill the boss, send no one else in. So overall, we sent 8 players in, and that seemed fine with us. You may want to send 10 people in if your DPS is quite low, and you feel like you're struggling. But one thing to note is that, obviously, when you are at the 0% corruption and you do have the buff, you really don't want to be picking up these purple orbs, the manifestation of corruptions drop, the big ads, because you'll lose your bonus. You'll lose your DPS or healing or damage reduction bonus if you're a tank. So only pick these up if you're willing or it's safe for you to get them.
Another thing is that when you do send the second tank and second healer in, do make sure it's a different tank. So basically, you'll have tank A pull the boss while tank B goes inside, and then once tank B's done on the inside, he'll taunt the boss, and then tank A will then go inside. So that makes it so that, of course, tank A gets to drop his stacks as well, that when he comes back, he'll be a lot more resilient to the boss as well, because he'll have that 0% corruption. Now, the thing is, you don't really, because you've been inside, doesn't mean, oh, I'm never picking up an orb, because if you have 2 of those orbs, that's like 180k damage per second on everyone in the raid. These orbs need to be picked up no matter what. If everyone in your group's just like dribbling on their keyboard or something, then you just got to make sure you do go and pick that up, because it's the most important thing, even if you do mean that you'll be doing slightly less damage or slightly less healing, especially as a healer, to be honest, because like, I think I'd rather do like a little bit less healing than actually have to heal up another 90k's worth of damage. So it's very, very important that you do go and pick up these orbs. But overall, this fight, it's really just about getting used to the trials on the inside and getting used to the boss mechanics, like such as like the big beam and everything like that, and of course dealing with those ads very, very quickly and picking up the orbs. And to be honest, you shouldn't have too much issue on this fight. It's a fairly simple fight. You just need to kind of wrap your heads around it a little bit and have a bit of a play about, and you'll get the feel for it.
So thanks for watching, guys. If this guide did help you out, then please do drop us a like. It helps us out rather a lot. And remember to comment, rate and subscribe.
And if you'd like to see any of our other 10-man normal Siege of Orgrimmar guides, then please do click up on the annotations you see on your screen now, and that will take you straight over to those videos.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you all.